Okay, now let me share that again. Welcome, everyone. Happy 2023. And let me get the PowerPoint up. Happy. All right, so we might have other ones joining us shortly, but I will go ahead and get started. And again, my name is Joy Cleveland. I'm the occupational therapist, part of Integrated Learning Strategies, and do all the coaching for Integrate with Success. So just a couple reminders for to welcome new members. Any newcomers, you can just keep your computer on mute just to cut down the background noise. But you can feel free to unmute yourselves to ask any questions at any time, as well as all calls are recorded so that everyone can view at a later time. All right, so let me go ahead and get started. Last in November, we took a break for Christmas, but in November we went over reflex integration and body spatial awareness. All of those probably previous ones are posted on our site, so feel free to go back and look at that as part of the course. And tonight we are going to go over oral sensory issues and retain primitive reflexes. So and first of all, I must say, I grew up as a very picky eater, so I can relate to this more as a kid that grew up with a lot of sensory issues myself. However, I have to let you know that in my practice, I've never worked with infants since I've started pediatrics. They were more school age. So my forte is working with kindergartners and up. I have dealt with a lot of children in the school age that are having oral sensory issues. I cannot say that I've ever worked with an infant or like looked at, or treated any infant or early intervention client. So just keep that in mind, that I'm learning along with you. I did a lot of research for this one because I don't have a lot of background myself firsthand, especially with the very young ones. But picky eaters may also have retained primitive reflexes. So some signs that you might see: does the child eat 10 foods or less? Does the child struggle with chewing or swallowing? Unable to know when they are full and continues to eat? Does the child have oral sensory issues, preferences of strong smells, or needs to chew on clothing and or objects? So obviously, I have what's the question? I see a hand raise. If you can unmute yourself.
Hi, yeah. This is Armida. I was just going to mention that I struggled this when my daughter, she was in early intervention. And so I would definitely, when you get through the lesson, if there's any questions, definitely can share my experiences
Sure.
with what was going on in her case, and we might even be covered in this. She was a mouth stuffer, so she liked to stuff her washcloth in her mouth, toy balls. Mostly her washcloth was her favorite, as well as food. She would stuff food, and not really chipmunk pocketing, but she really liked to have a really full mouth.
Okay. Yeah, so I am definitely interested. And as I go through this, we can come back and you can then give some tips on how they addressed it in early intervention. Okay. That would be great. So thank you for sharing that. All right. So these are the things that you're looking at. And then I'm going to highlight this one. Okay. So signs of routine primitive reflexes or oral sensory is vomiting, allergies to a lot of foods, fussiness, biting and chewing problems, hoarding food, um, extreme sugar cravings, repetitive diet, like they just only eat a few things, and then sucking and swallowing trouble. Okay. So, and again, feeding is not I'm not a guru with feeding, but there is a lot of issues with pocketing food, as she was mentioning. Um, I have witnessed this more in the older population, especially since when I worked the hospital and was dealing with stroke patients and things like that, they couldn't feel, where the food was because if there's one side was paralyzed or whatever. But there is way that, kids and or adults can kind of put food and they do pack it like a chipmunk and they don't fully swallow their food. So that can be an issue. All right. So the retained fear paralysis reflex, as you're going through the course, especially for the ones new, just starting to go through the course. This one, if your child or client is having issues with oral sensory, then this might be the reflex that also is showing that it's retained. So kids might feel over anxious or stressed and exhibit that fight or flight. So technically feeding should be like especially as an infant, it should be a calming, it should be, a very natural and not a stress thing. I can tell you that one of my friends, when we were first having our babies, and she was a physical therapist, I was an occupational therapist, and my son was basically 2 months, was born like 2 months, at least a month, if not 2 months younger than her child. And then when we got together after she had had hers and I had had mine, I was nursing really well. It was my second, so it was not new to me, but she was really fighting to get that child to take a bottle or to nurse from her. And not to be too sad, not to dry this down, but some of her picky, finicky feeder of an infant child, she went back to work, and unfortunately, her first day back at work, um, her daughter ended up dying of SIDS at a caretaker's house, because she ended up falling asleep, and even though they tried to revive her, and it was diagnosed as SID, and she didn't know it, but on the backside, picky eaters, there's a high incidence of SIDS in that very young age, um, that are picky eaters, and they have a higher risk for SIDS. And so that's a really well-known fact. The problem is it was not well known to her being a first-time mom or even being a physical therapist, but we worked in an adult rehab unit at the time. So some of these primitive reflexes, when you in highlight of what normal development is, there are some key things that I always stress with parents as well as clinicians to enable parents that when in their gut they feel something's not right, they need to speak up, because a lot of pediatricians just want to quickly say that you're the helicopter over anxious new mom, new parent or something. And sometimes your gut instincts, and my friend on the hindsight, she lost her daughter, but she did end up having another very soon after that one. But it helped her to realize that speak up if in doubt of some issues and be the advocate for your child, because sometimes doctors don't take the time to really listen to when you say she's having difficult feeding or I'm having difficult nursing. And so there is probably a lot of early signs that she probably had a lot of developmental delays, but then there's that feeding can be picky feeders, can be a high incidence of SIDS with a newborn. So keep that in mind. All right, so this one, the routine reflex, they may be overwhelmed by strong smells, taste, or textures. And the overwhelming smells, it could be a pleasant scent versus it being something like the smell of broccoli. It could even be the smell of banana bread or something. But sometimes that can excite a child so much that you might see them just stimming and running around the house and being out of control. So it doesn't have to be an horrible smell to cause increased or to exhibit negative behaviors. So just keep that in mind. But it's any kind of a strong smell that they could be opposed to, whether it's pleasant or foul. Prevent kids from trying new foods. I said fearful of or intimidated during mealtime, and kids will stick to eating only a few foods. Okay. So that is what you're looking for if you know that your child is tested positive for paralysis. If you're having some of these other issues, then you're going to get some overlaps. The more you integrate the reflex, then you could be improving upon those things. Now, the moral reflex also is closely tied with the sensory system. And I cannot say this enough, and I chose this one. Um, they they crave sweets. Like, of course, all of us crave sweets, but some kids really crave sweets like tremendously. And there has been research studies done that it can be a high cortisol production. They are the ones that will eat, pure sugar cubes or even eat ketchup, anything. Now, I didn't think that ketchup is sweet, but that was in the literature. But they eat like humongous kind of things that typically you wouldn't see someone just diving into the bowl of sugar and eating it raw kind of thing. They also gravitate to a lot of high carbohydrates, processed foods, and the rice and pastas. And everybody's coming. Welcome, everybody that's joining us. And they also like to snack throughout the day rather than eat a whole meal. And they may hate smooth or chewy foods. Some of them might crave that as well, especially crunchy foods. And they eat repetitive foods in their comfort zone, and they don't explore outside that comfort zone. I don't know how many parents I have on here versus therapists. I can say, the hardest thing, even myself having children, and I was a picky eater growing up. So that did not make me really good at being a parent because I was a picky eater myself. And I didn't really want to make it all about food. When I say I was a picky eater, I was the youngest in my family. I had 2 older sisters. And not that my parents really made food too much of an issue with us, but I just remember at times my mom would always kind of generally speak, if you eat your dinner, you eat what's on your plate and you can get ice cream, you can get dessert. And we always lived by the budget. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And I just remember that my dad might get paid once a month. And, they were on a really strict budget of how much that they could provide, per week. It was that whole, itemizing out the budget to last until payday. So it wasn't like the cupboards were stocked full of all sorts of treats that we could just go in at whim and eat at. It was a very structured kind of thing to some extent. I can tell you that in my experience with growing up with that, I was, the youngest. So my mom would make other statements to the older kids, and it wasn't like it was an army of us, it was just 3 of us. But I remember vividly if there was something on my plate, whether it was broccoli, whatever it was, because I really wouldn't try too many foods. If there were certain things that I didn't want to try on my plate, in my mind, it was like, ice cream isn't worth it. I was that type of kid. You couldn't bribe me with cookies or ice cream if I was going to have to eat something that I really didn't want to eat. So I say that with caution in the sense of, I, again, am not the expert of how you get your kids to eat healthier foods versus just eating that small. I tried with my children. Now they eat anything and everything as adults. I can tell you when I was raising them and I'm working full time, we come home, we try to sit down, and my husband and I would try to introduce like broccoli or cauliflower or whatever. Well, my one son, he took his first bite the one time, and let me just say that none of us wanted to eat the rest of our meal because it didn't stay down. It just came back up when he did that. So it was one of those moments when you're in survival mode of the therapist and you're working all day with clients and you come home and you just want to be with your kid. And I can say that it was literally like I had to pick my battles, and food was not one of them. Um, Luckily, they didn't really have issues too much, so that I didn't really end up damaging or harming them because they weren't hyperactive. They didn't have any other signs like that or anything. So however, I can tell you that there is one parent on my schedule who is very, very strict. Her oldest is very severely, has a severe autism, and her other child is on the spectrum of autism, but he's kind of at the other end. So she has both on the spectrum. But she kind of grew up pretty healthy in the sense of she was a ballerina by trade. She's always kept her body physically fit. She still teaches on the side when she can as in choreography for students. So she always wants to keep herself physically fit, but she grew up in that was her norm, exercise and eating healthy. And she also wanted it for her children. So they don't get sweets or carbohydrates, very, very little. Even the bread they eat is very little carbs. They eat tons of vegetables, and they even chop them up, and they're 10 and 8, and she just got them the nylon knives that can cut so that she can kind of be a little bit more hands-on cutting food and things like that. She thinks it's made the world a difference in her oldest son. I have seen him through and through, and I can definitely say it's definitely more helpful than it is harmful. They do get sweets every now and then. They work to get that special ice cream treat at the end of the week when they work hard in all their therapies and all their schoolwork. And some of the milkshakes and things like that. But she does limit the dairy. She does limit a lot of the gluten. I mean, they really live off of a lot of vegetables and just pure protein of foods. So I strongly think it's for the best, but it is hard for any other parent that I know of to stick to it, in other words. She really doesn't break it that often. The only people that break it is the grandparents, and she tends to let them break it. So if they go to the grandparents, then they know. Okay, so one of the routine reflexes, which is not covered in our course, because our course was originally in term Primitive Reflexes 101. We then kind of renamed it to Integrate with Success. But the founder of the company did not go into all the little minor routine reflexes. And this happens whether it's minor or major, but this one was not considered one of the key ones, so it was not included. But I can tell you that the Babkin reflex is triggered when the baby's palms are lightly pressed in the palm of the hand, and then the baby's mouth will open and it bends. The head will come forward and also to the side. It really is there because it really helps. It's there ever since the conception. It's one of the first things that starts in conception, but it lasts that 3 to 4 months through the nursing, because that's really what gets your baby to know how to suck and how to latch on to the breast if they're doing breast, or to obviously figure out what the bottle's like. Now, I can tell you that I found this really interesting, and I'm gonna go with my client Johnny, who I talk a lot about. There is a blog in Integrated Learning Strategies. There's his whole story is available for reading, but he, I think, probably has this Babkin reflex. I think he did. Now, whether how strong it is now. And so tomorrow when I see him, I kind of really want to screen for it to see, because he holds his pencil too tight, and then he starts to really raise his shoulder when he writes. So his mom has always noticed that. We've noticed that for years, ever since, and I've been working with him since like 2017. He doesn't do it as like, severe as it is now, but if he's stressed out and he's having to think of a math problem or do something, I noticed that he really tightens up that whole upper quadrant. The mom notices, and then she always is kind of sitting by him, and she always will tap, okay, relax your shoulder. And a lot of times she will tap his hand to remind him, to loosen the grip or to keep his hand down on the table, because he might want to, arch everything up and everything kind of comes away from the paper. So I'm kind of interested to see if we stroke, what kind of response we get. Because I'm thinking that it may not be fully integrated, So he does those. The other ones that are listed there, as you can see, difficulty swallowing, biting, chewing. As they grow older, they may have difficulty coordinating oral, motor, and hand to mouth feeding skills. So it's the kid that may not really be able to do the utensils. I do have a couple of my kids, and they're quite behavioral nightmares, in the sense of they're just kind of really out of control. There's the one kid that, he's like 7 or 8 years old now, and he will much prefer to just eat with his fingers than grab the utensils. So he goes to a regular therapist. So she does, I'm the school-based therapist, but he goes to a brick or mortar therapy group that's really trying to work on some of those other tangible feeding kind of things, and also a sensory gym to try to regulate him. And then I'm just the component of the school component at this point in time. So, and then the other exhibiting is like a nail biting habit, is also can be in there. The other one, the root and suck reflex, if retained, may play the greatest part in a child's picky eating habits. Can cause issues with sucking, swallowing, chewing, may bite their cheeks or tongue while eating. Kids seek to constantly have something in their mouth, gum or gummy bears, something chewy, which I will come back to that. It can be a positive. So some of these are not necessarily, you can turn it around to a positive. And then if it develops in the second month after, it develops in the second month after conception and is active to, again, the first 3 to 4 months of a baby's newborn. So retained, you will also see the following signs: hypersensitivity around the lips and mouth. The tongue may remain too far forward in the mouth, and the child may drool during eating. Trouble chewing certain foods, lack of mature swallowing movements, speech and articulation problems, and poor manual dexterity can result. Again, this is not covered in the book, in our course materials. However, it is out there. I did see the Vapkin on YouTube, kind of showing like a little YouTube of a baby exhibiting it. And then there is a guy, the therapist, that was presenting on like an older adult and noticing that it was retained. And I think he was seeing her for like maybe some TMJ issues, kind of things like that. So it is out there for you guys just to, obviously I always try to, when you find it, you have to find enough sources to make sure it's valid and validated in several different sources. But some of these sites that I was on were legitimate therapy clinics and well known to the treatment and their channel on YouTube. So let me go back to the one that, can you share your story about your daughter that was stuffing her food in her mouth and how they worked with that.
Yeah, I can share a little bit about that. So here, let me share my video. Hello, everybody. So my daughter, she started having feeding issues from the time she was born. And I'm actually, wow, I just learned a lot. I know so she was too little for me to do all of the reflex testing, because she's 3.5 now. And I started working on this with her. I found out about this stuff a year ago, and she's been in early intervention. And anyways, right now I just heard that, kids who have these feeding problems actually are at higher risk for SIDS, and I didn't know that. And I was actually talked to that way by her pediatrician when he's letting me know she's losing 2 ounces a day. She was losing weight very quickly. You need to consider bottle feeding, but it wasn't that simple, because I was trying to nurse. I was a first-time mom, and yes, I didn't know what I was doing, but I had talked to like 4 different lactation consultants, and all of them were telling me, like, they teach me different techniques. I was like squeeze feeding my child. I was spraying milk into her mouth. And finally, I knew there was one that I had been going to the pregnancy group with. There was a lactation consultant that did the exercise class, and I knew she knew about tongue ties. And finally, about 2 weeks into my daughter's life, I got a hold of her. She checked, and she's like, she might have a lip and tongue tie. Here's some resources for you to find out. She did have a lip and tongue tie, but she was unable to feed, and as a result, she couldn't practice these things during conception, is what they explained to me. And well, we kind of covered in here is that they're supposed to develop, as it says here, in the 2nd month and so forth. And they also need to be moving in a certain way. And she wasn't moving. She'd kind of move her arms in conception, and at her rump, I'd see it move in my belly. But she did not move enough. And so she technically got torticollis in utero. So they believe the reason she got torticollis in utero is because of her lip and tongue tie, because she was kind of stuck like this, because her mouth was like stuck and her lip was stuck here. And so the poor child, when she was trying to feed, it's like she would do this, and then she would bang her head on my breast. So I was literally squeezing milk into her mouth, or I was having to express and syringe feed. And meanwhile, the pediatrician's getting mad at me for her losing 2 ounces a day. And if I tried to give her formula, and she threw up because the bottle just let her eat it too fast, and she actually ate too much, and it just like went flying like projectile. So then it was like, that means she's getting air. And so I was seeing all the signs of a lip and tongue tie, which I learned about that during my like expected parent class for my work. It happens to be like, I guess somebody didn't sign up for the dental insurance for their infant, thinking like, oh, babies don't have teeth. And then they had to pay for all of that out of pocket. And I mean, there's still a lot of things that I had to pay for out of pocket, but I was able to get hooked up with the myofascial therapist, an oral myofascial therapist. And one of the first things we started doing was actually hog rolls. And when she got her lip and tongue tie release, I was doing these special exercises to move her mouth and to remove some of that gag reflex. So I had to do like these rotations, and I used to play windshield wiper with her up in her like, and I used to say windshield, like try to make a game and be like windshield wiper, and then I do rolls under her tongue, and then I had to do that around inside of her gum line and the upper gum line, and then on the top of her roof. Like, it was basically the exercises. I also needed to stretch the side of her cheeks, and all of these things I had to do pretty much before I fed her, because it helped her kind of move her, once she had the surgery, move her lips into the correct position. Otherwise, she went back to this. Like, she wanted to do this even after they released the actual physical restriction. But even if a child doesn't have a lip and tongue tie and they're having these issues, because one of my friends, their son, he throws up when they feed him, and they didn't know why. And so I'm not sure if this will work, but I showed her the exercises I was doing with my daughter to search, and he's 6 months older than my daughter, and it helped. Now he started showing this again now that he's 5 or 4. And I told her the name of my like child's oral motor like occupational therapist that she worked with as an infant. And so that's what I did in infancy. Her myofascial also had me working with her doing these, like I said, the hog rolls were really important. Um, and just
And
doing
can you demonstrate what was the maneuver that they did?
Let's see, I wish I had one of my daughter's dolls.
So is it rocking back and forth this way, or is it rolling?
So let me see if I can find a quick so by
Like
hog roll, you know what a hog looks like on a stick when they like the pretend like barbecue, like
yeah, but they're upside
and
down.
it's a cartoony, like in the cartoons they
Yeah.
put the hog and then they tie
Yeah.
the arms together and they put it on a stick.
Uh-huh.
Well, you hold this is in infancy, because you can't do this with a larger child. So this is one of the ways they help stimulate some of these movements, and you do it on a soft bed, and you have to hold their little arms and legs, and you're literally having to like roll them from side to side.
Right. Okay.
And that's what she called a hog roll. And that was going to help her. What is that called? I don't. Part of this was related to vestibular function and the vagus nerve.
Right.
So
Right.
then they sent me to a craniosacral therapist. That's also how I got hooked up with her OT that did the oral motor stuff. She would work on a hammock with her a lot. So again, it's that rocking.
Yeah.
And then her chiropractor would actually do adjustments inside of her mouth because she had, well, I mean, it's really interesting. And whenever I get like adjusted, my chiropractor so happens to practice like he went to a school that taught a global approach, so he doesn't practice a particular method. He does all of the methods, and whenever he works on my cranial sacral regions, it's like I know why it's called that, because when he works up here, I feel it in my sacrum. Like sometimes it's kind of like that's what's going on. That's why I'm feeling a bit like bladder urgency going on, or like something like that. And so I realized how much that matters to my daughter because she's still seeing her chiropractor as well. And one of the things that they said was her hips were extremely tight. So one of the things they also did in infancy, because of the torticollis, even though usually it's not, they tell you not to lay your baby on their side. And this is before they're rolling. She wasn't rolling yet. I had to use a 1-pound bag of rice and put her on the side she did not want to be on when she was asleep, and put a 1-pound bag of rice behind her. And so she couldn't roll back. But you don't want to do this once the baby can roll, because this is what, like I said, this is an effort that's been going on since she was 2 weeks old. Pretty much a lot of what you described is my experience on the way she feeds. We've worked really hard to like try to get her to eat a variety of foods. She's highly motivated by sugar. I tried to keep it out of her diet as long as I possibly could, because I already knew that she would be. I just knew. And so it was out of my house until one day she finally knew about it and could name it and could request it and could go on a hunger strike until she could have some. And anywho, but things that we started working with in early intervention as well as she got older. So like a lot of external resources that I went out and looked for, like I said, I was told by several lactation consultants it was lack of practice and not anything with my child's feeding. I was told like by her pediatrician that I was just being an anxious first-time mom. And I didn't accept those things. While I listened to them, it would be like, okay, I'm gonna keep looking. Basically, like I didn't tell them that. I still needed her doctor. So I'm not going to get in a fight with these people. And I wasn't going to, I just kept looking because I knew there was something wrong. And I was a first time mom, but I babysat, and my mom ran a home daycare, and there was 9 kids like that went through that daycare. Like she only usually had 1 or 2 kids at a time, but like a total of it's almost like I had 9 little brothers and sisters. And like I knew something was wrong with my child. So things that worked really well for her to, and it's amazing because she's 3.5 and she can whistle. So I taught her how to whistle. That's one of the things they recommend, because that actually, and humming, as well as like, and for adults who need to stimulate their vagus nerve, and that's why yoga is so comforting. That's why we do the You're actually stimulating your vagus nerve, and that is very calming. And I see some head nodding, so that's really cool. So, and this is all the stuff that I learned as a parent, going through find resources, going through early intervention, finding therapists that can help me, taking, this workshop, watching YouTube. I've been my daughter's like biggest therapist and advocate myself, because
And
a lot of times, like, this was very validating to hear that, I'm so glad I kept trying, because I caught teary-eyed when you said what, like, it's so sad that they didn't know these things. And that's the thing. This is in 2019. I was being told that my daughter's feeding was kind of my fault,
right.
and they weren't acknowledging the fact that there's a danger in the situation here. Her pediatrician's response to me getting her lip and tongue tie released was like, "Oh, did that work?" So he's a good pediatrician, but he doesn't believe in that. He doesn't think,
Right.
he signed off for her to get continue. I needed, once she got graduated from early intervention, I needed her to continue in OT. And he signed off on a referral form for the purposes of insurance and just said, this person needs OT, but he doesn't think she does. He basically
And that's
thinks I'm crazy and a first-time mom who doesn't understand that this is normal. And I just didn't think, I think she needs help. And I think me continuing to get her help has made her life better. And I said to
definitely
me, so
so.
some of the, yeah. So she, things that we work with are, so some of the things when she was an infant was playing things like sticking out her tongue, making faces, just making faces and having her copy. I brought her whistles, baby harmonicas, which a lot of these things are like really easy to get, like in little packages, like those little infant toys. I got her, like, some of the whistles are kind of loud and annoying. The party blowers, the ones that have the little thing, like teach, because that has automatic feedback to the child
Feedback.
and they find that fun. Then they wanted me to teach her how to like suck with a straw, but and teach her with like in the tub, but I was like, that's a little gross. But I ended up teaching her how to blow bubbles and hoping that she wouldn't like inhale the bubbles. They told me to get a vibrating toothbrush, so I got her, geez, I
I'm
feel
gonna,
like I should have
well,
brought, it's this
I'm
little
gonna,
U shape
I'm
thing.
gonna pause you for just 1 second because I can show this because I'm gonna share. Let me just change here. So let me share. So I don't know, some of you, and kudos for you of being an advocate for your child. Kudos for always asking. I hear what you're saying, professional, but I agree with you 100%. Kudos, I cannot stress that. Most of my parents, I make them make sure that they're being an advocate for their child because you know your child better than anybody else. And you may not have the occupational therapy degree I have. However, if you find the right therapist, you can find the right answers. Okay. So for those of you that are new, this is our integrated learning strategy movement center, integrate movement center. So this you do have to have a membership of. It's a membership based thing. However, what I'm going to show to you is just to give you some examples. I didn't even realize, since I don't do a lot with oral sensory in this regards, they have all these right on here about everything you need to know about oral stimulation. So you mentioned the vibrating one. So let me just play this video for everybody, and you guys can see the video, correct? You can see my screen with all the videos on there. Okay, just make sure it worked well, that I shared it correctly. Okay, so let me see if this is going to work. And I'm going to fast forward because they always introduce.
May have, and she's got some great ideas here for us.
Okay, so I'll start with this one. This is just a vibrating massager that you just push. So a lot of kids love vibration.
Okay.
And they love to hold it up to their mouths and their jaws. You'll see a lot of kids put it onto that jaw muscle right there.
Oh,
And
okay.
that gives a lot of strong oral sensory input.
Okay,
Any kind of
great.
vibration. Now these are vibrating toys that you can mouth. So you just twist it, and you can even increase the intensity or lower the intensity of the vibration. And they have great little pieces that a child can chew on and really get that vibrating input
So
inside their mouth.
they can just chew on or put that in their mouth and then feel the vibration plus chewing at the same time or biting.
Great. Okay, and they can do the same thing and just put it on the outside of their mouth as well, but these little pieces are great to put inside of their mouth if they want more intense input.
Wow. And they're soft too, so no jagged edges for the mouth.
Okay, and I also love vibrating toothbrushes that they can brush their teeth with.
Do you use it with toothpaste or you just, okay,
You
because
can
they
do
like the
either
flavor
one.
if they want?
Yeah, a lot of kids just love the intensity of the vibration.
Okay.
And so it's great to do it with a toothbrush also.
So will they just hold the brush like on the teeth or is it on the tongue or they kind of suck on it a little bit or just
They
whatever
can
feels
do
good?
They can do all of that, whatever feels good. A lot of times with this kind of input, you let the child guide how much they want, because once their needs are met, they will say, no, I'm done with that.
Okay.
But this is a great way to brush their teeth also, an appropriate way to brush teeth.
Yeah, it serves two purposes. You get
You did hear that, right? The audio was working, correct?
Yes.
Okay, good. So that is just one example. Let me go back to the other one I was going to highlight. There we go. Okay. There is the
jewelry. I saw that was one that was and the blowing activities.
yeah.
Those are the ones.
So the
play, and we are talking.
And she didn't give her, there's a much more variety. So when you see this, I mean, now they make bracelets and all sorts of stuff.
So chewy necklaces are great. So this is specifically designed to be chewed on.
Okay.
It's a silicone that is durable enough to chew on, and you can wear it as a necklace. So a child could wear it all day long and then just use it, especially as you're thinking through a school day.
Maybe when they're especially taking a test or feeling anxious, it helps for calming that.
Okay. So I don't have great success with these with younger children. I've had kids that like to chew on it and they get it slobbery, and then they like to spin it and all that spit is flying around the room. So
Not good in the
teachers
classroom.
do not like that. But I have had success with older kids, like junior high students, that are able to use this appropriately.
So do they just kind of tuck it down in their shirt and then pull it out as they need it? Do boys, like junior high boys, mind a necklace?
Some do. If you look closely, I like to look on Amazon, and there are some designs that look cooler and older and not babyish. Sometimes you see like a little shark tooth design or something like this that looks more age appropriate.
Okay, great.
Okay, so gum is always a great one, but like I said, you have to use it with caution. You need to make sure that the child can control it, that they're not going to.
So that is that she didn't, I mean, now they make bracelets and, that they can just wear on, and because some people, they might bite their own skin. So
Yeah. I was trying to find Isabel's, my daughter's things. She has bracelets, she has necklaces, she has slap bracelets, all sorts of stuff. But here's some stuff that I used. Like they have like the toothbrush that they were showing.
Okay.
And with the whole vibrate function, now she likes to pick out toothbrushes that have her favorite characters. And it
Cool.
still helps. The other thing that I got her to kind of try something different is this really funny, my
Oh,
camera is not very good. So it has like really funny bristles.
and then they can put in the mouth, and that's like brushing your teeth,
Yeah.
right?
And it vibrates and it has different like speeds.
I did see that, and I wanted it one of my autistic kids to try it.
This is great for children with autism because you can brush all of your teeth in 30 seconds and you basically stick it in their mouth and you tell them to shake their head or they can shake the thing, one or
Yeah.
the other. And it's one way for them to be like get 360. You get the top and the bottom. And there's another one that they recommend for children with autism. And this is mostly for sensory for her. To get her to do stuff. And of course, the infant brush that has the little
Yes.
nubs and the
Yes.
little thing. And when she's a baby, she would take this away from me and pretty much do what I taught her to do with this one. And she'd shake her head with it because I think she really needed that input, like desperately. And then like she has a fun straw that she, it's a little chewed on. And she likes to pretty much this was kind of her teaching tool. So find like a really nice, thick, like fun straw that has like a, it's fun and it's kind of big. And she likes to play with it, blow on it. And it did come with like a decorative item that you could put on there, but she took it off. But just there's all sorts of things. Like I said, I have all sorts of blow toys. Like I bought a birthday pack that just has the party poppers. So, and then the other thing that was really important, and I think you mentioned it, was because they also, which they didn't explain all this to me, but kids who have this oral stuff have the moral reflex retained and they have the fear paralysis as well. So they're gonna like working with her on it. So I have a peanut ball. My place looks like a physical therapy. I have like a peanut ball. I have a regular ball. I have the weird ball that they hold on to and bounce on. I have the roller board. I have a trampoline. I have like all sorts of stuff. So it's kind of like her whole home PT and OT and oral sensory place. Now, it doesn't mean that it's easy with the food. We work very hard I work so hard. And in my case, I also didn't want to make it a big thing with food because I didn't, so one of her family members has an eating disorder. And I don't want her to feel like she needs to sneak food or like there's special food and there's like, you have to clean your plate. And so I'm trying to be mindful of that. And so what I try to do is actually put ice cream on her plate or a treat of, that I have, like if I have chocolate, I'll put some M&Ms. And I only put like a few because I know she's going to want more. And I tell her she has to eat real food. So I don't tell her how much of it she has to eat. I do tell her she has to eat real food. And for example, yesterday, she didn't want to eat her real food. She ate the junk food options. And then she said, she wanted more chips. And I said, she loves chips. And that's the thing. She really, as much as I spent 3 years of her life keeping it away until I knew one day she was I'm not going to be able to. She basically really wanted chips. And I said, did you eat, your soup? And she said, no, because I was already full. And I said, well, I guess you don't eat chips then. So, and so that's where it stayed. It wasn't like, I'll go eat my soup. It was basically, she said she was full. So you don't need chips then. You just want chips because it's stimulating,
Yes.
So
and she probably wants the crunch,
yes. So
and
actually you just reminded me. So she asked me, well, can I have some iced chips then? And so we got some ice and she wanted it to be softened. So I was like, well, let me put water. And she's like, but I don't want ice water. I just want the ice chips. And I said, well, if you leave them in there, they get softened and they'll be like like, and then so she's like, can I get a spoon? And so that's what she wanted. And so, you know, it's kind of like, that's what I try to do is you know, she's kind of getting things that I would prefer she not eat. Kind of like your Johnny's mom, that fitness has been a big thing in my life. And not really in my family, but in my personal life. I was a personal trainer. Like I was a snowboarder for I was an instructor for several years. Like, so I've been an athlete. And so, you know, health and fitness is very important to me. And it sucks that my kid eats so much junk food, but like, part of it is, it helps me, like I use it as a therapy tool, and then I put real food in and just like, here's this, if you want more of this, you got to eat real food. And then I also, now that she's older, teaching her like natural consequences, such as like the fact that like, well, I'm really hungry and it's only been like 30 minutes since breakfast, and it's like, well, you chose to eat like something that's very not satisfying.
Right.
You're the one who wanted to eat a bag of gummy bears, so now you're hungry 30 minutes later. Like,
Right.
next time have the scrambled eggs. You know, and I do feed her now, like, and I'll be like, well, it's almost 11, so it's pretty much lunchtime. Let me make you something for lunch. But you know, she's starting to learn that, you know, and they can start learning that earlier. Now she really is reflecting on that, and she's heading towards 4. But for me, in my opinion, I think this is going to be a lifelong thing that we are going to be working on. You know, I won't be surprised if, you know, she's still working with a therapist, with an OT, like in high school.
Yeah. And I was just posting out for everybody to see in the chat box. She mentioned myofascial release. You may not know how to spell that term or know anything about that, especially if you're a parent. I am a product. I didn't know too much about myofascial release either, but I got injured being a therapist. And I actually had a pulled brachial plexus, and myofascial release is like kind of like a massage, but it's much more allowing, you know, you're kind of peeling the layers of your muscle structure and things like that. It's sort of like you have a woven sweater from head to toe, and it's that fascia that's in and around the muscles. So if therapists and I did have therapists as an adult, and they were my colleagues, that even with my injury, they were treating me like I just needed to strengthen. My problem is, you know, it was all I was actually in a spasm, you know, and it was pulling my posterior rib out. So I couldn't breathe deeply. And there was a lot of other issues. So it really took some other therapists that were my really good friends that took me aside, and they had a conversation themselves, you know, like, I just heard that Joy didn't go to her son's play at school, and you know that Joy goes to everything that her kids do. And it was one of those things that all these other therapists that knew me, you know, just my makeup of what I prioritize in my life with my children at that day and age, that something was majorly wrong. And luckily, it was like one of those things that they posed the question to me. And not only did they say, get a new doctor, you know, and of course this was a workers' comp issue, so it was a little bit more complicated, but I did make the change to a different doctor. And then I totally changed my therapist and asked to move over to the therapist that, yes, they were employees of our system, but I did not know them until they became my myofascial therapist. And it was only like right before COVID that the one retired. And I'm still in the search for a good myofascial therapist. So there's a lot of therapists out there that might say they're good or that they know myofascia, but that does not mean
They don't.
And the other thing I say is there are some therapists that will claim to be like a oral feeding specialist or the breastfeeding. And again, they don't, you know, they may not. I do not claim to be. I grew up when I first became a therapist. I started this right before I mentioned this to Connie before, I think it was, but before nobody else was on. But when I started, and this is back in the 1980s that I graduated high school, and you know, and in 87 I graduated college. But when I first entered OT school, my first person that got me into the program I was in Pennsylvania, she happened to know my dad, who was retired OT, now retired OT, but back then he was in the profession, and she was like the guru. I mean, people drove hours and hours. Now we live in Pennsylvania, so we're kind of close to Baltimore, Maryland, and and all the different parts of Pennsylvania, and people drove for hours and hours to find this little old lady who, she was very petite. She looked old to me because I was in my 20s, she was definitely much more skilled for me. And she had severe scoliosis, like a spina bifida or whatever. So she had derangement of her, her physical, whatever. And there she saw these very, very tiny, tiny infants to, toddlers, whatever. And she worked amazing. I mean, I just sat in awe as a new therapist, as a shadowing therapist, just in awe of what she did and how she did things. I never entered that field because I have an issue with oral myself, with food and stuff. So I never wanted to become that's why I chose not to do speech therapy. I teach how to hold utensils, but all the manipulations in the mouth, because you have, because partly what your daughter was also having too is and my grandson's having this problem. He's really having speech problems. He's really delayed teaching and getting even my son. And, it's kind of worse for me because it's my daughter-in-law. And, where do you draw the boundary of hitting the alarm button for them as newbie parents? It's the first child, so they interpret everything for him, but he'll be turning 3 in March. And just at Christmas time was the first time I heard him say mama. And he says gaga for daddy. So daddy said it's gaga. And they don't even say gaga daddy or gaga dad. So they're not even putting that D, in there. He is starting to start speech therapy, but since it would mentioned by the pediatrician, but then but the mom who has her own, it's hard to admit your child has a problem. You have to psychologically get through that emotional part of it, and I still think she struggles. She wants that perfect infant, and she struggled in her pregnancy. She struggled, just with anxiety that something was wrong. And then he was born with a major hernia that has reversed, things like that. But he's majorly constipated. I still think that's kind of, I think there's some retainment there, retained.
So
issues.
you just brought up another thing. My daughter has suffered from a combination of constipation and diarrhea. So like, I never really saw the diarrhea, but it was, and her doctor never really believed it because she called it daycare diagnosed diarrhea, and she'd get kicked out of school all the time. And so she just restricted, which the school would always forget, not to give her juice at snack time. And that seemed to kind of resolve it, but eventually it became an issue. And what I realized was that she was going through periods of constipation, and then when her body was just like enough, she would finally get diarrhea. And so one of the things I just started doing on my own, because that's what I do in my own life, is I added probiotics I got infant probiotics for her. One thing I did notice was she was developing spoon nail on her toenails, like the big toe, and that is a sign of iron deficiency. And so I realized that, like, as a nursing child, like a child that nursed, that I was iron deficient, and that's where she would be getting her iron from. So I immediately talked to her doctor about that, and she recommended a multivitamin, and she just had me give her half the dose because it was a vitamin with iron. And at the time, I think it's for children that was older, like 2 and up, and she was like 1 or not 1 yet. So that is where I did get, and this is why I was like, I don't dismiss her pediatricians and doctors and stuff. Like, I still need them on my side. But it's like one of those things where, like, I chose also to dismiss when they were dismissing me,
Exactly.
And it's kind of like, well, I'm going to ignore you on that. She's fine, because I don't think she is. And then I'm going to look for your help when I need your medical help. And so we did a finger prick test to save her the blood draw. And it was like towards the low end of So she wasn't anemic, but it was on the low end of the spectrum. So we guesstimated she must be low, and she didn't give her like a high dose, just giving her like a normal dose for her age. That seemed to help with the diarrhea situation. Now that she's getting older, I've noticed that she's developed bruxism. I don't know if anybody knows what that is. Bruxism is when you grind your teeth in your sleep. That's grinding your teeth. And so when she's sleeping, I hear her just like going to town. And so while that's considered normal for toddlers in general, it can be pretty common. It can also be common in children who have sensory disorders, who have she has insomnia. She has, and she has she's always, I need to do massages and magnesium lotion and all sorts of stuff. And I looked at my magnesium supplement and I saw that it's approved for 4 and up. And I was like, well, she's almost 4. I'm going to give her the 4-year-old dose, and only when she's really backed up, and see if it helps with the sleep and the anxiety at night, as well as helps her with going to the bathroom. And now she tells me on her own, oh, my tummy, can I have one of those tablets, she says. I have to make sure to hide it. I mean, it is childproof, but that doesn't mean anything. So yeah, there's been a lot of things, and that is something that happens with this stuff, is I feel like, especially if they're having cranial sacral stuff, if you have really tight muscles, it's very difficult to go to the bathroom.
Yeah. So unfortunately, hopefully he's starting services. They got a new pediatrician. So I'm trying to slowly make them to be a little bit more proactive and, and be advocates. This screen, can you guys still see, or did I stop screen share? Can you see the additional resources? You might want to take a screenshot of this page. You can come back to it, if you know how to access the whole video, but each one of these does a link to an article of what it says here. And those articles were written by Megan, or gathered by Megan, one of our administration's assistants at our company, Integrated Learning Strategies. And they do link you in those articles to some of the other guru therapists that oral is their thing. So I just wanted to make sure that you had them. You can link on them. Some of them are, I thought this one, I don't know if it's it may not work because I'm in the PowerPoint, but but I can go there otherwise. But our time's up tonight, so you can look at those. Hopefully this was an area of interest. Thank you so much for sharing. It's always nice to have someone else talk than me, and also from a personal perspective. So feel free, if you have any other topics that you guys want me to do. Some of it might be review. We got new people joining. Connie's new to the course. She's I just started it. I think she said several weeks ago. So I'm not sure what my next topic will be next month, but we will be going through different things. I can share more treatment plans, give us ideas, anything that you email to infantthelearning.com corner, or go to our website and I'm sure if you email there, but Megan will definitely let me know what the questions are or any topics, and we can put our heads together to make sure that we serve you the best we can in 2023. So any other closing thoughts, any questions that you have at the end? All right.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
You're welcome. Take care.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. We'll stop.